right, good morning guys and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today we're on episode 88 and I want to dedicate this episode to one of the first, if not the very first, New York clubs that I got to experience back in the day, all the way in the year 2000 when I was still back in college, which is frightening now that it's 21 years ago. But the very first trip that I ever took to New York was to see Tony Draper at Club Exit on Exit Fridays. It was just called Exit Fridays back then. And up until then, my clubbing experience had been relegated mostly to the popular Philly clubs. I had spent time a lot of nights at Egypt Wednesdays. I would go to Lifted Sundays at Shampoo. Every once in a while, I would go to the 8th floor, or there was another couple of clubs that were like sort of like B-list, even in the Philly scene, that every once in a while I would pop into. But pretty much within the Philly scene, when you went out, you knew the types of tracks that you were going to hear. The Kim English, Unspeakable Joy type vocals were being played. There was a little bit of Tribal House, a little bit of like Kosheen, Hide You, just like vocally, tribally, Star 69 type music. And that was all well and good. I was very happy to be getting exposed to these like more, now that I look at it, a little bit more mainstream sounds in the Philly scene. And I was gobbling up all the music that I could get. I mean, that was back when Napster and LimeWire and such were, and Audio Galaxy were in their prime. And I'd sit there with my dial-up connection and just try to download as much as I could because I was just so enthralled by this music. But I'll say that I pretty much had my mind blown the first time that I went to Exit, because I've said this before, the clubs in New York are A-level, right? They're like the World Series. And to me, the Philly clubs were like maybe Little League, or maybe the World Series of Little League, but they never really had the right sound system, right? Like the Philly clubs, they'd be loud, but loud can be kind of stupid too, in my opinion, right? Like you can just have mids and highs just screeching in a room, right? And have like some underpowered subwoofers and it'll be loud, but it's not like a real sound system, right? So my friends, I had a friend in college, his name was Tom. This guy would go up to the New York clubs like Sound Factory and Exit, and he was telling me, he's like, bro, you got to check out these clubs in New York. He's like, you'll see, right? So I take his word for it, and me, him, and 3 other people went up to Club Exit. So this is my first experience in New York, and I remember walking into to Exit, and I stumbled into this Tony Draper on Friday nights scene that I just didn't know who the DJ was going to be. I had no idea what to expect. We just knew that Friday was pretty much the night to go. So anyway, so I walk into the venue, and you come out on that second floor mezzanine, right? And I remember just like looking down over the floor, and it was kind of shaped like a basketball court, just like a compact rectangle, and it had a really high ceiling, like a 3-story ceiling. So the first thing I remember noticing was like the acoustics of the room. I was like, this room sounds really good. And I also simultaneously noticed, I mean, the club opened at I think 11, right? And we got there at like 11:15, like some newbies, right? We didn't know any better. I noticed that the sound was kind of low, and I remember kind of thinking to myself, like, man, I thought this was going to be like a more hoopla, right? Like I just remember being like kind of underwhelmed and like kind of almost like nervous that was as loud as it was going to get, and it was kind of making me uneasy. But anyways, my friends and I started to walk around the club and, you know, kind of scope it and see where all the rooms were. And when we got to the other side, the opening DJ, who was not at this point Tony Draper, I don't know who it was, it could have been any opener, he started playing this track here. This is Sonos Keep Control. Now, I feel like this is aged so well. Like, I went and played this past week, and I absolutely still adore this record. For me, it's always been about the original extended mix, and the vocal is just such like a well-written song. I love it so much.
Think it's time to put an end to it. Try to clean my hair again. Start to resuscitate my engine. Try to walk back where I ran. Keep control of me. Try to keep the frequency. Keep control of me. Try to keep the frequency. I'll break up all the things behind me.
So my friend and I are sitting there listening to Sono and just jamming out, and I remember him and I look over at each other and we're like, this is a sick venue. You could start to see people coming in. And I would say maybe around 12:15, 12:30, all of a sudden an air raid siren goes off. And I was like, okay, what the hell's going on, right? And in typical classic New York fashion, all of the amps and all of the subwoofers and everything went from about 60% volume to 100%. And all of a sudden, like, the room started hitting hard. And I was like, oh, I get it now. I was like, I understand what this, like, I felt the power. I felt the power of like a real sound system for the first time in my life. And I just remember being like, what the hell is this? And the reason that I was talking about the vocals and the tribal house that I was listening to in Philly is because the first time I went to see Draper was my first experience with anything like hard, like truly hard, like hard house and hard trance, that German hard style just wasn't really being revealed to me in Philly. I'm sure it was being played in Philly, but the places I was going were probably too like vanilla or mainstream to really get exposure to it. So me being a 20-year-old, now I got knee injuries and all kinds of BS. But when I was 20, I was like, ready to get down, right? So I noticed like the way that people danced and just the vibe in the room was completely different. Like, I'm gonna like try to like emulate. Like people would do that Nordic tracking dance move where they would be so fired up and be listening to like beats that are like at least 135, 140 beats per minute. And they would just be like rocking out and like high-fiving each other. And that's what the dance circles were back then. And specifically the track that really like I remember out of that first night, like absolutely blowing my mind, was this one here. And you guys all know this. Anybody that went to Exit for Tony Draper, you were guaranteed to hear Blow the Speakers. Now, there's two versions of this. There's the Mighty Ghost and the original. I'm pretty sure Tony, actually he might have played both, but I think it was the Mighty Ghost one was the one that he dropped. But either way, they're both sick. You guys are all familiar with that strange whooping back scratch type sound that is only, it's like featured in this track. And these two guys, the Moon, basically produced this weird but like signature hard track. And specifically related to the context of Exit, I remember standing on the dance floor. I was in the main floor, and this guy walks out in the middle of a dance circle, and he had two purple glow sticks, right? And he, like, I guess he had just cracked them, so they were like bright as hell. And he just like drops them out of his hand, right? And they're just suspended. And I'm like, what the hell is this, right? And all of a sudden, when Blow the Speakers drops, like he starts like doing the, I guess it was called poi, right? And like the circle that he was spinning had like a 5-foot arc on each side of it. So it was just like nuts. I was like, I can't, like what is even happening here? Do you know what I mean? And when the Moon, when Blow the Speakers goes off, man, it has reverb built into it. So to take a track like this and put it in Exit with a 3-foot ceiling and tons of space for it to open up, I just remember that wall of treble as this track like was wailing away, just coming at me, and I just couldn't get over how cool it was. One of the weird things that I noticed about that Blow the Speakers record is something that I can't really say I've noticed in any other record. If you spin that record backwards, like if you're rewinding it and you play that synth lead, it sounds the same forward as it does backwards, right? Like most sounds aren't symmetrical, so like if you spin any record backwards, like you can't recreate the original sound by playing it backwards as you can forwards. But for some reason, that Blow the Speakers record, if you have it, just spin it backwards at the correct RPM and you'll see that it basically sounds like itself. Aside from like the kick drums, they sound backwards, but the lead somehow still sounds the same. It's really weird. But anyways, moving on to the next track that really got my attention that night after Blow the Speakers settled out. I don't think it was very long, maybe another half hour, until this track came along. This is Progress's Everybody. And for me, I've always been I'm an 80s kid. I love 80s pop, like Michael Jackson, George Michael, Madonna. Right down the middle, I love like Cyndi Lauper. I just love all that 80s cheese. It just has that charm to it. The way that those 80s tracks were written, it was like simple and like tight and kind of just like perfect emotional music. And Progress, Everybody, if you've ever listened to the original Papa Don't Preach by Madonna, just go and grab it on YouTube if you want and just listen to the first 20 seconds of it. It has a violin solo in it. And those strings are very signature and very recognizable. And Progress came and made a hard trance track out of it. And I love it. So I'm there like hearing these 80s remixes, and maybe you could classify some of these as cheesy now, and maybe they always were cheesy, but I just absolutely adored this. And I remember just feeling like very happy when I was listening to this. And the next track that you guys might remember from your first Exit days, like something that was played every time, is this one here. This is Safri Duo's Played Alive. And the signature sound in this track was the bongos. That's why it was called the Bongo Song. Everybody had this. Everybody had it. Everybody played it. And the reason that this track fits so well at Exit was because of the way that the bongos hit in this. You can play this on earbuds and you can feel the reverb. So imagine taking this and putting it in a high-powered sound system, like I said, with a big open ceiling, and just letting these drums open up. When this track starts, the intro comes in, it's nuts, man. Those bongos got everybody fired up. And it's not just about the drums in this track. It's kind of shifts into a beautiful, I guess maybe commercial leaning trance track, but that melody is really good, man. I mean, in hindsight, it's one of those tracks that kind of straddled the line between commercial and underground, and it created that feeling of nostalgia in you, where it's like when you hear this, when you play this back, you can't help but be transported back to maybe 2:30 in the morning at Exit, and everybody's just going nuts. And my last pick for you today, and before I go too far down this road, I want to say that this is actually going to be a 2 or 3 part series, because as I started looking through my collection, I realized that I probably had 3 episodes worth of exit tracks to talk about with you guys. So I'm at least going to do a part 2, maybe 3 if I can like pull all the records together for it. But getting into the last record for today is one of the biggest, most popular, sought after tracks that were played at Exit Fridays, and it's this one here. This is Silent Nick's Palladio. Now, I had to nerd out and kind of get the history of this. So it wasn't called Palladio to Exit people. It was called Diamonds, and it was called Diamonds because the signature hook in it is from the De Beers Diamond commercial that was popular in the 90s, where they say, how else could 2 months salary last forever, or something like that. I'll give you guys a clip to the commercial. It was called Diamonds. There's actually a Diamonds mix on here, but I have to tell you guys that the mix that was played at Exit of this track, Silent Nick Palladio, was actually Silent Nick's mix. And you cannot get the Silent Nick mix on CD, and you can't get it on vinyl. So you probably had to get it straight from Silent Nick himself. And the person that was able to do that was Tony Draper. I guess Tony and Silent Nick knew each other. So Tony was able to get like the hard trance version of Palladio from Silent Nick. Now, if you want to get it on physical media, you're going to have to settle for what I consider to be closest to the Silent Nick mix, which is the Diamonds mix here. Now, it's similar to the Silent Nick mix, but it's different enough that you'd be like, sounds a little bit off. Like, I kind of want the original. And I also wanted to add in here that the name Palladio actually came from a classical music composition that was composed a while back. I don't want to attribute Palladio to a specific composer, because just like in dance music, there's very often an original source and then a remake years later and then another remake years later. So I'm not even going to say who was the first one to compose Palladio. I'm not sure. All I know is that when this track came in at Exit, it blew people's heads off. Like, I mean, this would usually get dropped a little bit later, 3:30, 4 in the morning. And the first time that I experienced it, I just couldn't get over how happy and energetic it was. Like, to me, it was like the perfect club track. Like, I in my naivete, I didn't know how else to describe it to my friends other than it being the perfect club track. And I came back, and after I came back from Exit that night, I think the following day I was posting on one of the forums where all the Exit people hung out, and I was asking, in almost hopeless fashion, hey guys, what's that really happy track? It's the one that sounds perfectly happy. And believe it or not, somebody on the forum actually was like, it's probably Diamonds. And I was like, what's Diamonds? And then they sent me that little bootleg recording that's out there where somebody actually took like a live recording, I guess with some type of recording device, and captured like a live moment of Diamonds being played at Exit. And I was like, that's it, that's the one. So there was years and years that went by. I want to say at least 2 or 3 years until a real version of Diamonds, aka the Silent Nicks mix, was actually released and leaked, and that thing flew around the message boards as fast as you could believe. So that's all for today, guys. Like I said, I'm going to drop at least another episode for this, maybe 2 if I can muster up enough music for it. And Tony Draper, thank you so much for all the tunes, all those happy memories on Friday nights. You really blew my mind. You exposed me to this whole hard scene that I had no exposure to, and I absolutely love those nights. If I could go back and drop 10 grand just to like relive one of those nights, I would spend it. That's how much fun I had. So thank you, and guys, I'll see you at the next Exit episode. Take care. Peace.